In the heart of the great African kingdom of Ndala, the palace glittered with wealth and power. The throne room was carved from ancient timber, its pillars wrapped in golden cloth and cowrie shells that glimmered in the firelight. Upon the high seat sat King Adewale, a man of deep ebony skin, with a strong jawline and a neatly trimmed beard. His crown, adorned with cowries, rested over his short, curled black hair. The king had fought many battles to secure peace for his people, and his broad shoulders still carried the strength of a warrior. Yet, beneath him knelt his own cabinet of elders, men and women who were meant to be loyal, but whose hearts had been darkened by envy. At their head was Elder Okon, dark-skinned and tall, with a sharp face and a long grey beard. His eyes, though lowered in respect, burned with hidden hatred. Beside him, Mama Jola, with warm brown skin and braided grey hair wrapped in cloth, smiled sweetly, pretending loyalty, while her heart plotted treachery. And Elder Kofi, his ebony skin shining and his scarred cheek twisted with resentment, knelt with fists clenched tightly under his robe. The elders bowed low, their voices heavy with false respect. They spoke of a sacred duty that awaited the king. A test from the gods, they claimed, but in truth, it was a cruel trap. And they demanded that the king travel into the dreaded evil forest to fetch the sacred water, guarded by a wizard feared across kingdoms and a dragon whose fire had turned men into ashes. King Adewale, though wary, was bound by honor. He looked upon his people, his eyes stern, his voice deep like rolling thunder, and he declared, "If this is the will of the gods, then I, Adewale, shall face it. The throne of Ndala will never be stained with cowardice." The palace fell silent. The elders lowered their heads, hiding the smiles that crept across their faces. Their plot had begun. The next morning, the palace courtyard was filled with uneasy silence. The drums of the kingdom, usually beating with joy, echoed with sorrow. For the people had heard of the king's coming journey into the dreaded evil forest. King Adewale stood tall in the courtyard, no longer dressed in golden robes, but in the garments of a traveller. His ebony skin gleamed in the morning sun. His hair, short, curly and black, was bound with a strip of red cloth, and his beard was now streaked with oil, as a sign of purification. His broad chest bore a simple warrior's leather vest, and across his shoulders hung a cloak of leopard. Skin, a symbol of courage. At his side stood the royal priestess, Iyabo, dark brown skin glowing with sacred markings drawn in white chalk across her arms and face. Her braided black hair was adorned with cowries, and her flowing white robe shimmered as if touched by the spirits themselves. She held out a staff carved with ancient symbols and whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. "Great King, the forest is filled with shadows. But remember, the blood of your ancestors walks with you." Behind her, the villagers watched silently. Men with shaved heads, women with plaited hair, children clutching their mothers' cloths. Their eyes were filled with both pride and sorrow, for they knew their king might never return. The elders stood in the background, pretending to mourn, but their eyes glittered like hyenas in the dark. Elder Okon raised his hand and said loudly for all to hear, "May the gods guide our king. May he return with the sacred water that will bless our land forever." The crowd cheered weakly, but Adewale's sharp eyes caught the flicker of deceit on Okon's face. He said nothing, only gripping the ancestral staff tighter as he turned toward the forest path. With each step he took, the drums beat slower. The king of Ndala was leaving his throne, walking into the jaws of fate. Later, the sun sank low, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, when King Adewale reached the boundary of the evil forest. The land before him was unlike any place in Ndala. The trees were ancient, their twisted roots like the hands of dead men clawing from the earth. Thick vines hung low, dripping with strange sap that glowed faintly in the shadows. The air was heavy, damp, and carried the stench of decay. The villagers never crossed this threshold, for it was said that spirits dwelled here. Spirits that whispered in the wind. Spirits that devoured men's souls. Even the bravest warriors trembled at the forest's edge. His Majesty, King Adewale, stopped and pressed the staff of his ancestors firmly into the ground. His ebony skin glistened with sweat, though the air was cold. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, his beard moving slightly as he whispered a prayer. Behind him, the villagers wailed in sorrow. Some women tore their wrappers in grief. Some men pounded their chests in despair. But the king raised one hand, silencing them. "Do not mourn me yet," he said, his voice deep and steady. "For I walk where the gods command, and I shall return." With that, he stepped forward. The branches seemed to creak in warning. The ground moaned beneath his sandals, and a flock of black birds scattered from the treetops, their cries echoing like screams. The evil forest swallowed him whole, its shadows closing like the jaws of a great beast. Behind him, the people fell to their knees. Ahead of him, the unknown awaited. Surprisingly, deeper and deeper, King Adewale walked, the forest growing thicker around him. The trees rose high like giants, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. Strange cries echoed from the shadows, whispers that seemed to call his name, laughter that was neither human nor animal. Suddenly, the forest path split into three. One led left, one right, and one forward. But each path looked the same, swallowed in mist. The air turned cold, and the ground trembled. A figure appeared ahead, a shadow with glowing white eyes. It wore no face, only darkness, and its voice slid into the king's ears like a snake's hiss. The voice slid into the king's ears. "Turn back, King of Ndala," it said. "The forest does not welcome you. Choose wrongly, and you shall walk forever in circles, until madness consumes you." Adewale's heart beat hard, but his face remained firm. He planted his staff in the soil, raised his chin, and called upon the spirits of his ancestors. The staff glowed faintly, casting light into the mist. At once, the shadows screamed and retreated, and the middle path began to glow faintly with golden light. Adewale tightened his grip on the staff and stepped boldly forward. The forest howled, but the king did not falter. He knew the spirits were testing his courage, and courage he would not lack. The path of light led King Adewale into the heart of the forest, where the sound of rushing water grew louder with every step. Soon, he stood before a wide river, its waters black as night, flowing fast and violent. Strange orbs of light floated above the surface, flickering like lanterns. But each one carried a whispering voice, the souls of men who had perished in the evil forest. No bridge crossed this river. Only a broken log stretched halfway across, slippery and cracked. As Adewale studied the waters, the river stirred. From its depths rose three towering figures, spirits made of water, their forms shifting between men and beasts. Their eyes burned red, and their voices boomed like thunder. "You cannot cross, mortal king!" one roared. "This river belongs to the spirits of the damned," said another. The ground shook as the water spirits advanced. The black waves lashed angrily, splashing cold mist onto Adewale's face. For a moment, doubt gripped him. But he remembered his people, his ancestors, and the throne he must protect. Raising his staff high, he struck the earth. The carved wood glowed brighter than before, and the ground beneath him hummed with ancient power. The spirits roared in fury, sending waves crashing toward him. Adewale leapt onto the log, balancing with the grace of a warrior. The spirits lunged, trying to drag him into the dark current. But with a fierce cry, the king swung his staff, and a burst of light tore through the mist. The river shrieked as though alive. One spirit dissolved into mist, another fell back, and the third writhed in agony. Finally, the waters calmed. The spirits faded, and the orbs of trapped souls drifted peacefully into the sky, freed by the king's courage. Adewale, though drenched and trembling, crossed the river safely. Yet his face had changed. His beard now wild, his eyes sharper, his strength tested by the battle. He looked less like a king and more like a warrior reborn. After crossing the river of spirits, King Adewale pressed deeper into the evil forest. The air grew heavy, and the trees leaned close together as if listening. The mist thickened until he could hardly see his feet. Every step echoed strangely, like he was walking inside a hollow drum. Then he heard it. "Father! Father!" The king froze. It was the voice of his daughter, Princess Ifeoma, sweet and trembling. He turned, and there she stood among the trees, clothed in white, tears glistening in her eyes. "My father, please, come back! You will die here!" she cried, stretching her arms toward him. King Adewale's heart clenched. But even as he reached for her, the staff in his hand grew hot, its light flickering. He remembered the words of the elders. The wizard of the evil forest bends the mind. Trust only the ancestors, not the eyes. He looked closer and saw that her shadow was wrong. It stretched upward like a claw, twisted and inhuman. "You are not my daughter," Adewale growled. His voice thundered like a drum. The figure screeched, its face melting into smoke. Dozens of copies of her suddenly appeared, circling him, laughing with high, cruel voices. The mist turned blood red. But the king knelt, pressing his palm to the earth. He prayed to the ancestors, his voice steady. The ground answered with a deep rumble, and the glowing staff sent out a shockwave of light. The illusions shattered like broken glass, and the laughter turned to screams. When the mist cleared, the king stood alone once more, sweat dripping down his face. His eyes had grown fiercer, his spirit harder. The wizard was watching him now, and testing his very soul. His Majesty King Adewale pushed forward, deeper into the evil forest, the air now colder than before. The silence was thick. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of wind. Then, without warning, the trees around him groaned and shifted. Their twisted trunks bent downward, and their roots writhed like snakes across the ground. Adewale, a voice rumbled. The king froze. The sound came not from a man, but from the bark of an enormous tree. Its hollow mouth split open, glowing faintly with green fire. "You are not worthy to be king," it boomed. Another tree bent low, its branches clawing the air. "Your cabinet sent you here because your throne is cursed. You should surrender to death. You should surrender to death." The king gripped his staff tighter, his heart steady. But the forest roared to life. Dozens of trees twisted their faces into human-like visages, all chanting at once, "Unworthy! Unworthy!" Their roots slithered across the ground like giant serpents, wrapping around the king's ankles and wrists, pulling him down. Bark splintered into sharp claws. The trees towered above, their shadows closing in like walls. Adewale's face hardened. He slammed his glowing staff into the ground. "I am king by the will of the ancestors, not by the whispers of demons." A surge of ancestral light burst from the staff, rippling across the forest. The roots burned away in smoke, and the monstrous trees shrieked, their faces splitting into silence. Slowly, the forest stilled once more, though the trees still loomed, watching, remembering. Adewale, panting, stepped free, but his eyes showed no fear. His beard was wild now, his clothes torn, yet his presence carried even greater majesty. He was no longer merely defending his crown. He was proving his destiny. The evil forest opened into a wide clearing, and before King Adewale stretched a river unlike any mortal had ever seen. Its waters were not clear, nor muddy, but thick and red, the colour of blood. The stench of iron filled the air, and bones floated gently on its surface, drifting like leaves. The king stood at the bank, his reflection staring back at him in the crimson water. Suddenly, the river churned, waves rising like a storm though no wind blew. From its depths emerged monstrous crocodiles, larger than canoes, their scales black as iron, their eyes glowing a fierce yellow. Their teeth gleamed like sharpened spears. One roared so loud, the trees trembled. One roared so loud, the trees trembled. "You shall not pass," the voice boomed, though no lips moved. The river itself was speaking through the beasts. Adewale steadied his staff, his muscles tense, his eyes sharp. He knew the cabinet had sent him here to die. And this test was no less than death itself. The first crocodile lunged from the bloody waters, jaws wide enough to swallow him whole. The king swung his glowing staff, striking its head with a crack of light. The beast recoiled, splashing blood across the bank. Another surged forward, tail thrashing, sending bones flying into the air. Adewale dodged, leaping across a stone, his cloak tearing as claws scraped his side. The fight raged on. 3 crocodiles snapping, circling, their bodies half submerged, dragging him toward the river. Yet the king's spirit did not bend. With each strike of the staff, the ancestors' voices echoed, guiding his hand. Finally, with a roar, Adewale raised his staff high. A blinding light flashed across the river, splitting the bloody waters in two for a brief moment. The crocodiles shrieked and sank back into the depths, vanishing into silence. The river calmed, though it still ran red. A narrow path of stepping stones appeared, glistening under the moonlight. The king, weary but unbroken, stepped onto the first stone, crossing toward the other side. The Forrest had tested his strength, his mind, and now his courage. But darker trials still awaited. After crossing the river, King Adewale entered a dark mountain pass. At the heart of the cliffs, a wide cave yawned like the mouth of a sleeping giant. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something unknown. A mixture of herbs, smoke, and power. Inside, the shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that seemed alive. From the darkness, the wizard appeared. Tall, lean, with ash-colored skin, tribal scars glowing faintly on his face, and dreadlocks tied with feathers and bones. His black and red tattered robes whispered against the stone floor as he raised a gnarled staff. Whispers against the stone floor as he raised a gnarled staff. "You've come far, King Adewale," the wizard said, his voice echoing like thunder. "But the sacred water is not taken lightly. First, you must face the Guardian." A low rumble shook the cave. From the shadows, a massive dragon emerged. Its obsidian scales shimmered in the torchlight. Golden horns curved sharply above its head, and smoke drifted from its nostrils. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, watching every movement of the king. Adewale, exhausted but unbroken, tightened his grip on his carved staff. His ebony skin glistened, his muscles taut, short curly hair tied with the red cloth, rugged beard streaked with dust and sweat, cloak torn from the forest battles. He took a deep breath, letting the ancestors guide his hand. The dragon roared, shaking the walls. Flames flickered along the stone, but the king did not flinch. He stepped forward, staff glowing brighter than ever, ready to face the ultimate challenge. The battle for the sacred water was about to begin. The dragon lunged forward, its wings beating against the cave walls, sending sparks of stone flying. Flames flickered from its nostrils, curling like serpents through the torchlit air. King Adewale planted his feet firmly, staff glowing brightly, every muscle taut. His ebony skin glistened with sweat, his short, curly black hair tied with the red cloth, beard rugged, cloak torn from his perilous journey. He leapt to the side as the dragon swiped with its massive claws, sparks scattering from the stone floor. The beast's roar was deafening, but the king's mind was sharp and his heart fearless. He remembered the ancestors' whispers, the lessons from the forest, and the courage of his people. Raising the staff high, Adewale summoned a surge of light that reflected off the dragon's scales. The dragon roared in surprise, its golden eyes narrowing. The wizard watched silently from the shadows, testing the king's skill and determination. The battle raged across the cavern. The king ducked, parried, and struck with precision. Each movement a dance of strategy and strength. He realized brute force alone could not win. Using the dragon's own momentum, he guided it toward a stalactite formation. With a final burst of light from the staff, the dragon paused, eyes wide, then retreated, respecting the king's courage and wisdom. So, breathing heavily, King Adewale stepped forward. His cloak hung in tatters, his beard streaked with dust. But his posture was proud. The dragon lowered its head in acknowledgement before disappearing into the shadows. The cave was silent now. So with the dragon retreating and the wizard silently observing, King Adewale stepped cautiously toward the sacred water. It shimmered like liquid light in a crystal basin, glowing softly, reflecting the flickering torchlight on the cave walls. His ebony skin shone in the glow, sweat streaking his rugged beard and short curly black hair tied with a red cloth. His torn cloak hung heavily on his shoulders, evidence of the battles fought. He knelt, placing his hand over the water. Its surface rippled, responding to the power of the ancestors. But suddenly, the cave walls shifted. Shadows stretched and dark forms emerged, illusions created by the wizard. Whispering voices demanded the king surrender the water, or be trapped forever in the forest. Adewale's heart did not waver. He remembered the lessons of courage, patience, and wisdom from his journey. Raising his glowing staff, he shouted to the spirits of his ancestors, calling upon their guidance. The illusions twisted and swirled, attacking with phantom hands and claws. But the light of the staff cut through the darkness. One by one, the illusions vanished, leaving the cave still and silent. Finally, Adewale touched the surface of the sacred water with both hands. Its glow spread through the cavern, bathing him in warm, golden light. The wizard nodded, acknowledging the king's bravery, wisdom, and honor. The final test of the evil forest was complete. King Adewale, battered yet triumphant, now carried the sacred water, the symbol of his worthiness to rule Ndala. Clutching the sacred water in a crystal vessel, King Adewale began his journey back through the evil forest. Though victorious, the forest had one final challenge. Shadows thickened around him, and the trees groaned like ancient spirits displeased. The wind twisted violently, carrying whispers meant to confuse him, to make him doubt his path. Branches stretched down like giant hands, vines coiled like snakes, and the mist thickened so he could barely see his own feet. The illusions he had faced before returned, but this time multiplied, surrounding him from all sides. Adewale's ebony skin gleamed with sweat, his rugged beard streaked with dust, short curly black hair tied with the red cloth matted from the journey. His torn cloak flapped against the misty wind. With the glowing carved staff in hand, he pressed forward. "Spirits of the forest, I have proven my worth," he called aloud. "Let me pass, for my people await." The forest roared in answer. Roots attempted to ensnare his legs, rocks shifted beneath his feet, and phantom figures emerged to block his path. Yet Adewale's courage, honed through battle and trials, would not falter. Each step forward was deliberate. The staff's light cut through shadows, guiding him like a beacon. Slowly, the forest seemed to yield. The illusions dissolved, the roots retracted, and a narrow path emerged. Though weary, the king's determination burned brighter than ever. The sacred water was safe, and the evil forest's trials had only strengthened his resolve. After days of struggle through the evil forest, King Adewale finally emerged at the edge of Ndala. The morning sun touched his ebony skin, glinting off the sweat and dust of his journey. His short curly black hair, tied with the red cloth, clung to his head, and his rugged beard was streaked with dirt and sweat. His torn cloak flapped in the breeze, and his muscular frame carried both exhaustion and the unbroken spirit of a warrior. Villagers spotted him first. Their cries of joy echoed through the valley, announcing the return of their king. Mothers held their children aloft. Men raised their fists to the sky, and even the palace guards rushed to greet him. King Adewale's eyes scanned the crowd. He had returned not as the polished ruler who left, but as a man forged by trials, tested by the forest, the spirits, the illusions. He carried the sacred water in a crystal vessel, glowing with soft golden light. The palace gates opened wide as the king approached. The elders who had sent him on the perilous quest bowed low. But this time, their eyes held fear and awe. They had underestimated the heart of a true king. Adewale's voice rang out as he entered the grand hall, steady and commanding. I have returned. The sacred water is ours. But remember, a throne is held not by fear or deceit, but by courage, honor, and the will of the people. The palace erupted in cheers. The king had survived the impossible and reclaimed his place, stronger than ever. Inside the grand hall of Ndala, the elders who had plotted against King Adewale stood before him, their eyes wide with fear. Elder Okun, Mama Jola, and Elder Kofi had expected a broken king, returned defeated or dead. Instead, they faced a man transformed, his ebony skin glowing with strength and courage. Short, curly black hair tied with a red cloth, rugged beard streaked from battle, torn cloak hanging proudly from his shoulders, and the glowing crystal vessel of sacred water in his hands. Adewale's gaze swept across the room. He did not raise his voice, yet each word carried the weight of thunder. You sought to betray me, to send me to death, but I have returned, victorious, stronger, and wise. Your deceit will not go unpunished. Elder Okon stammered, trying to speak, but the king's steady eyes silenced him. Mama Jola lowered her head, trembling, while Elder Kofi's fists clenched in shame. The king lifted the sacred water high. Its glow filled the hall, casting golden light over every carved pillar and golden decoration. This water represents not just my victory, he declared, but the courage, honor, and unity of Ndala. Let it remind us all that betrayal is weakness, and true leadership comes from heart and spirit, not envy. The hall was silent, the elders humbled. The king's people, watching from the sides, erupted in quiet relief, knowing their ruler had conquered the impossible and restored justice. The palace courtyard overflowed with people from every corner of Ndala. Music from drums, flutes, and xylophones filled the air, and dancers twirled in colourful robes, their movements telling stories of courage and triumph. The sky blazed with the first light of evening, painting the palace in gold and crimson. King Adewale stood at the centre of it all, his ebony skin glowing in the warm light, short curly black hair tied with a red cloth, rugged beard streaked with dust from the journey, and torn cloak flowing behind him. He held the glowing sacred water high, and the crowd cheered, recognizing the trials he had endured and the wisdom he had earned. Elders who had once betrayed him now knelt in humility, their envy replaced by reverence. The people's voices rose in unison, celebrating their king, who had faced the impossible and returned victorious. The royal priestess Iyabo approached, carrying a ceremonial crown inlaid with gold and cowries. Placing it gently upon his head, she whispered, By the ancestors, your heart, courage, and wisdom have proven you worthy to rule forever, King Adewale. The crowd erupted into joyous celebration. Torches flared, music thundered, and the kingdom of Ndala danced late into the night, knowing their king was not just a ruler, but a hero whose journey would be remembered for generations.